Have you just received a DJI Mini 2 for Christmas or gifted it to yourself? Then congratulations, you have just got a fantastic drone and you're going to have a lot of fun. Here's 15 must-know tips for new DJI Mini 2 owners to help you get the most from your flying experience. Hey guys, I want to help you get the most from your drone. So make sure to hit that like, subscribe and notification bell so you don't miss any of my upcoming tips and tricks and tutorials to help you level up your drone game. Today we're looking at 15 must-know tips for new DJI Mini 2 owners. Start simple. We all see these incredible cinematic and complex shots on YouTube and think, I'm going to do that. And we take our drone and head out and jump right in at the deep end. But my advice is to start simple. The first time flying your drone is a complete sensory overload. You're trying to learn the muscle memory to be able to fly your drone without really having to focus on, okay, if I move the stick this way, what way is the drone going to go? You're learning what all the app settings does. You're learning how the drone responds in the sky. It's just so much information the first few times you're flying your drone. So I recommend you start flying in a large open area like an empty football field, and you do a couple of things. Start with your drone in cine mode. It's the slowest speed the drone will fly at, or beginner mode. And then practice a few simple maneuvers. Start by doing a loop, then start by doing a figure of 8 and build up the muscle memory on them sticks. The last thing you want to do is take your brand new DJI Mini 2 to a complex environment and crash it immediately, because that will really ruin your day. Do not practice flying near people. Flying near people will be A, a massive distraction, and B, cause a lot of unwanted attention as a beginner flyer. It can be extremely distracting. Again, all you want to focus on is learning to fly your drone. So the less distractions, the better. Flying away from people will also reduce the risk of accidents. Not only can it be distracting and potentially unsafe to fly near people, you can aggravate them because they might not know what's happening. And also, as you start to move up to bigger drones, legally you're not allowed to fly near them. So if you plan to end up flying bigger drones, or just if you want to stick to the best practices possible, then you don't really want to be flying near people. The last thing you want to do is annoy somebody by flying your drone when you're trying to learn how the drone works and have them come over and start asking you questions about what you're doing with your drone, why you're flying your drone there. You're best just to avoid these situations, full stop. Calibration and pre-flight checks. The first time you go out to fly your drone, you will most likely have to do a compass calibration. This is a really simple procedure. It's initiated by the app and sees you rotate your drone in a couple of different positions. And this is so the compass can calibrate and know which direction it's flying. The next two things you want to do is make sure your batteries are fully charged and that your propellers are secured down. On the DJI Mini 2, these are screwed in, so you just want to go around and make sure them screws are snug. The last thing you want is for a propeller to come loose during your first flight. Lastly, before you go flying, make sure your controller and your drone's firmware are fully updated. If your firmware is quite out of date, your drone will not actually be able to take off until you've updated that firmware. And you could be out on location with no internet, not able to do that update, and then you could have traveled all that way and not actually be able to fly your drone. So make sure your firmware is updated, and if you've got the flyaway cover, make sure that your RC controller is binded to your drone. Fly within line of sight. One of the biggest things I see new drone pilots do is immediately fly their drone out of sight. They maybe don't realize that you have to maintain visual line of sight of your drone, or they don't realize just how easy it is to lose sight of your drone. They're simply looking at the app, flying their drone, and all of a sudden they look up and they've just completely lost sight of their drone. It's very easy to do, especially with a small drone like the DJI Mini 2. Now don't be alarmed if this happens, because DJI has really good assistance systems in the app to help you locate your drone. For example, there's a map in the bottom left corner of the app which will show you where the drone is on the map in relation to you. We'll show you a line so you can fly the drone back, and we'll also show you the direction the drone is pointing. Legally, however, you're required to visually maintain contact with your drone unaided. You are allowed to use glasses, but you're not allowed to use things like binoculars. So you must always be able to see your drone in the sky. So always remember to maintain VLOS, or visual line of sight. Know your location. If you're going to a new and potentially complex location, always do a quick scout. Always have a quick walk around just so you know the layout and where everything is. Especially if you're planning on flying lower than normal, You want to make sure where all the obstacles are, so where the trees are, where the power lines are, where the lampposts are, any potential objects that could cause a hazard to your drone. Being able to visually map the location in your head will make flying your drone much more carefree. You'll instantly recognize point of interest on your screen and know exactly where in the sky your drone is without having to think too much about it. And also, knowing your location will help you plan more cinematic shots because you'll know where them points of interest are. You'll know the best routes to fly your drone to get the best cinematic sequences in that area. So always scout it out. It's well worth the few minutes. Just walk around, recognize where all the obstacles are, recognize where all the points of interest are, make a plan in your head of where you're going to fly your drone and what you're going to do with it before you take off. Be patient. It can be really common and also really annoying to think just because you bought this brand new drone, you'll be able to replicate some of the photos and videos you've seen online straight away. That's not the case. And you can take that drone out, go flying, record a bunch of footage and think this is going to look amazing. I can't wait to share this with my friends or family or online. Come home, look at it and think, that's really underwhelming. There's a lot more to drone flying and getting cinematic shots than simply hitting record. For example, you need to learn the best camera settings for time of day and location. You also need to learn how to fly your drone smoothly and cinematically. You need to learn what angles and maneuvers give the best type of shots, and also then how to post-process that footage to really add saturation, make it stand out and add your own flair to it. And these are the sort of things that you will learn simply by flying your drone and going out and capturing footage. And over time, you will get better in each of these areas. And to be honest, for me, that's the most fun part of it, constantly trying to improve yourself to get better and more cinematic footage. So be patient. If your footage doesn't turn out how you wanted it to the first few times you go flying, don't be disheartened because you will get better and better. And after a while, your footage will look amazing. Trees, light posts, and power lines are the enemy. In my opinion, you should stay well clear of these three items. All it takes is a lapse in judgment or a gust of wind, and you could potentially lose your drone. Power lines are particularly tricky to see on the screen. One of the first crashes I nearly had with my drone was I was taking a recording of my car, and the car was just parked on a private road, and I was simply doing a descending shot, just something nice and simple. I knew the power line was there because it scouted the area, but on the app and on a small phone screen, it is near impossible to see power lines. And so I was descending, and I descended just about that much behind a power line. Any closer or a gust of wind, and I probably would have hit it. And I wouldn't have known until I had hit it because it's really impossible to see it on that screen, and I was relying on that because the drone was just there above me. Just stay well clear of trees, power lines, and lampposts because the closer you are in proximity to these things, the more likely you are to have an accident. Set return to home altitude. When return to home kicks in the DJI Mini 2, your drone will fly up to a set altitude and then fly back to you and descend down. Now in settings, you can change this return to home altitude, and it's always important to set that altitude higher than the highest obstacle or object in your location. So if you're in a location where there's tall buildings, always go into settings and make sure that return to home altitude is higher, so that if you lose signal to your drone and return to home kicks in, or you're relying on return to home to bring the drone back to you, that the drone won't go up to a height which is actually lower than the highest obstacle and potentially fly into it. So it takes a few seconds, go into settings, set that return to home altitude higher than the highest object in your area, and you'll know that if return to home kicks in, the drone will fly safely back to you. Check GPS signal. When you go to take off, always make sure the GPS has locked before you fly further away from yourself. Having GPS locked is critical for a safe flight. If GPS hasn't locked, you will be flying your drone with visual aids only. And a few things can happen if it's only relying on visual aids. It will tend to drift because it won't be able to hold position as well. And it also won't have return to home and feel safe features engaged. So if you lose signal with your drone far away from you, your drone will not be able to return back to you automatically. So in short, it's much safer to fly your drone with GPS locked. So always make sure when you hover your drone off the ground to quickly check that GPS is locked. If it hasn't, wait a few seconds to a few minutes for GPS to be confirmed, and then go flying, and you will know that you're flying in the safest possible way. Buy extra batteries. You will find very quickly just how fast time goes when you're having fun flying your drone. You can be getting these amazing cinematic shots, these amazing pictures, and before you know it, you burn through a battery. And this becomes more apparent once you start traveling further afield to points of interest to get photos and videos. One battery really isn't going to cut it. You're not going to drive 50 to 100 miles away to only get like 20-30 minutes of flight time. You really need more batteries to be able to maximize the amount of content you can get on location. For this reason, if you've only got one battery, one of the first things you should invest in as you expand your drone flying hobby is more batteries. I recommend 3, and that way you can charge them all up, go to these amazing scenic locations and know that you've got plenty of flight time, plenty of battery to get all the photos and videos you need at that location. Think about it, if you've only got one battery, you're not going to drive 50 miles, get 20-30 minutes of flight time, drive 50 miles back, charge it, then drive all the way back. Having multiple batteries gives you multiple options. You could use one for scouting location, finding the best angles, one for getting all the videos you need, and one for getting all the photos you need. 3 batteries just gives you maximum flexibility. So if you're looking to expand your DJI Mini 2 and drone flying hobby, I recommend the first investment be in more batteries. If you haven't bought your drone yet, really recommend the Fly More combo. Be aware of wind speed. So the DJI Mini 2 handles really well in windy situations. But once the wind gets much faster, once the wind speed gets much higher, then a drone as small and light as the DJI Mini 2 starts to suffer. Once you get up near the maximum rated wind speed of the DJI Mini 2 of 10.5 meters per second, you will find the drone much harder to control, and you can end up in situations where you might fly your drone off in a tailwind, not realize anything's wrong because it's flying fine, turn to come back in a headwind, and you might struggle to bring that drone back to yourself. It's quite obvious that if you check the forecast and the wind speed is above 10.5 meters per second, not to take off. But something beginners forget about is gusting wind. Wind speed and gusting wind are 2 different things, and gusting wind speed is usually much higher than the actual forecasted wind speed. Gusts of wind can easily blow your Mini 2 off course. So it's super critical to check the forecast for the wind speed and the gusting wind speed, and if the gusting wind speed is above 10.5 meters per second, not to take off. I use an app that I recommend called UAV Forecast, and you can actually plug in your drone's maximum capabilities. So in this case, for the Mini 2, 10.5 meters per second wind speed, and it checks the wind speed and the gusting wind speed and will immediately tell you if it's safe to take off or not. Don't fly in reverse. As a beginner, I really recommend not to be flying in reverse. When flying towards objects, it can be easy to see when you are getting too close to them and take evasive action. But when flying in reverse, you simply can't see what's coming up ahead of you. This can make it really easy to accidentally collide with an object if you're not paying attention. The only exception to this is if you're flying in cine mode, which is ultra low speed, and you're not traveling a huge distance. So if you're just doing a slight zoom out shot from a point of interest, in cine mode, you're not really putting your drone in too much jeopardy because you're not traveling a huge distance at a huge speed. But if you're in normal mode, flying fast, traveling big distances in reverse, I really don't recommend that as a beginner because that's most likely when accidents are going to happen. Know the rules. When flying a drone, even one as small as the DJI Mini 2, you have to follow the drone law for your country. Each country has a different set of rules for each weight class of drones, and so it's important to check them for the drone you're flying, in this case the DJI Mini 2, for the country you're flying them in. You might not be allowed to fly in a certain area, for example, or you might not be able to fly a certain distance near people or near particular objects. You always want to get landowners' permission as well to take off or land on private land, and some areas have bylaws which prevent you from flying on them. So always check the location you're flying your drone as well to make sure that you're allowed to fly your drone there. Always know the rules at all times to make sure you stay on the right side of the drone law. Use manual settings for the best results. I always recommend using the manual camera settings for the best videos and photos that you can get from your DJI Mini 2. Using auto mode is okay in your first couple of flights to get the hang of things, but you want to transition over to learning the manual camera controls as soon as possible for the most cinematic footage and photos you can get. Being able to adjust frame rate, ISO, color temperature, etc. is critical to making sure you get the best results from the DJI Mini 2. There are situations where auto mode does a great job. In really sunny, great weather conditions, auto mode usually does a decent job, but there are situations where auto mode just doesn't give you the best possible results. And you can mitigate all that by learning the manual controls, always using the manual camera settings, and that way you always have the right settings on your camera for the right location, and you always get the maximum results from the DJI Mini 2. Learning the camera settings off the DJI Mini 2, because you can get exceptional results from such a small drone once you've worked out the best settings to use. Have fun. Lastly, one of the most important tips for beginner flyers and new DJI Mini 2 owners is just have fun. No matter why you're flying your drone, maybe you just like flying drones, maybe you want epic cinematic footage, maybe you want amazing photos to post on your social medias. Maybe you just want to learn all the features of your new drone. Just have fun flying and don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged when you don't get the results you want. Don't be discouraged when you accidentally crash it. These are all things all drone pilots go through and work through, and it's all about learning to fly your drone better, learning to use its capabilities to get better results, and that is the fun of flying your drone. Simply flying your drone over and over means every time you're going out and improving, and every time your results will get better. Don't be discouraged and always have fun. Trust me, we all crash. We all have days where we go out and take photos and videos and think that's going to look epic, and we come home and we're like, I can't use any of this. It's all terrible. This happens. It still happens to me. And it's just all part of the fun of flying your drone. So hopefully these 15 tips will help you get the most out of your new DJI Mini 2. Now before you go, please make sure that you've hit the like, subscribe and notification bell button so you don't miss out on any of my upcoming tips and tricks and tutorials to help you level up your drone game. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.